FBI agent Simone Brooks has made a career out of bringing the most untouchable criminals to justice. But when her investigation leads her to Logan Whitmore, a billionaire tech mogul with a spotless public image and shadowy connections, she finds herself up against a force unlike any she's ever faced. After Simone publicly confronts Logan, he uses his wealth and influence to humiliate her, casting doubt on her reputation and getting her suspended from the bureau. But Simone isn't one to back down easily. As she races against time to expose Logan's illegal empire before he vanishes with billions, she discovers secrets far darker than she ever imagined. With powerful enemies closing in and her loved ones at risk, Simone must decide how far she's willing to go to bring down a man who seems untouchable. In a world where money can buy anything, even justice, Simone must risk everything to expose the truth. But as she digs deeper, she uncovers a conspiracy that reaches into the very heart of the system she's sworn to protect. Can one woman stand up to the world's most powerful men, or will she lose everything trying? Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. Rain pounded against the asphalt as Simone Brooks gripped the steering wheel of her car. The windshield wipers swiped furiously, but it did little to improve visibility on the dark, rain-soaked street. She had just left the charity event, an opulent gathering filled with people far too wealthy to be bothered by the problems of those beyond their gated communities. As she drove through the upscale neighborhood, Simone's thoughts were consumed with what she had overheard. Logan Whitmore, the billionaire tech mogul, had been boasting about a new financial venture that, to the untrained ear, sounded like a business triumph. But Simone knew better. She'd heard enough veiled references to suspect that it was yet another shady deal, the kind that skirted the edges of legality. Suddenly, flashing blue and red lights appeared in her rearview mirror. "You've got to be kidding me," Simone muttered under her breath. Pulling over to the side of the road, she took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time she'd been stopped in a neighborhood like this, but something about tonight felt different. The rain-soaked officer who approached her car wasn't wearing a standard police uniform. His attire was more tactical, more aggressive. Simone's instincts flared, but she forced herself to stay calm. "License and registration," the officer demanded, his tone sharp and impersonal. Simone's hands moved slowly to retrieve her documents. "What's the reason for the stop, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he yanked open her car door. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. A shiver of apprehension ran down her spine. "Excuse me, but I have the right to know why." "I said, step out," he shouted, gripping her arm and pulling her out into the rain. Simone's heels slipped on the wet pavement, and she stumbled, barely catching herself before falling. Before she could protest further, more men appeared, all dressed in similar tactical gear. They surrounded her, their faces obscured by rain-drenched caps. The chill of the night air bit through her thin coat as they pressed her against the hood of her car. "Search her," one of them commanded. The humiliating pat-down began, rough hands searching her pockets and seizing her phone. Simone's protests were drowned out by the rumble of an approaching SUV. The sleek black vehicle pulled up beside them, and the back door swung open. Logan Whitmore stepped out, a smug grin plastered on his face. He was the picture of confidence in his expensive overcoat, completely unbothered by the rain. He approached with the air of someone who owned not just the city, but everyone in it. "What's going on here?" Simone demanded, struggling to regain her composure. Logan's grin widened. Well, if it isn't my favorite trespasser," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Caught you snooping around where you don't belong." "I wasn't trespassing," Simone shot back, her anger flaring. "This is a public street." Logan waved a dismissive hand. "It's private enough for me. And you've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong for too long, miss. What was your name again?" He tilted his head, pretending to think, though they both knew he was well aware of who she was. The crowd that had gathered, drawn by the flashing lights and commotion, began filming the incident on their phones. Logan, ever the showman, turned to face them. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a thief and a liar here," he announced loudly. "Caught in the act of trying to steal company secrets." "That's a lie," Simone shouted, trying to twist free from the officer's grip, but it was no use. The men holding her only tightened their grasp. Logan leaned in closer, his voice a mocking whisper. "I own this city, sweetheart. You really thought you could go up against me?" He stepped back, raising his voice again for the cameras. "I think we need to teach her a lesson about trespassing, don't you all agree?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, more interested in the spectacle than the truth. Simone could feel her heart pounding, frustration and humiliation boiling inside her. She had to keep her cool, had to remember her mission. But right now, all she could do was clench her teeth and endure the degrading charade. "Take her away," Logan ordered. "Make sure she's booked and held overnight. Maybe that'll teach her some manners." The officers shoved Simone into the back of a squad car, slamming the door behind her. As the car pulled away, she caught one last glimpse of Logan standing in the rain, his expression one of smug satisfaction. The city's lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows as the car sped away. Simone sat in silence, her jaw clenched, her mind racing. She had expected pushback from Logan, but not this, being publicly humiliated and thrown into a cell like a common criminal. But she had no intention of giving up. If Logan thought he could break her spirit, he was sorely mistaken. She'd play along for now, but soon, she would show him that he had picked the wrong person to mess with. As the squad car turned a corner, disappearing into the darkness, Simone's thoughts shifted to her next move. She might have been knocked down tonight, but she was far from defeated. There was much more to her than Logan, or anyone else, could ever imagine. The dull ache in Simone's wrists reminded her of the rough treatment she'd endured the night before. She rubbed at the red marks left by the handcuffs as she walked out of the precinct, the early morning light casting a gray pallor over the city. The officers had released her without so much as an apology, but the damage was already done. Her sister, Tasha, was waiting for her outside, leaning against an old sedan with crossed arms and a worried expression. As soon as Simone approached, Tasha pushed off the car and wrapped her arms around her. "What the hell happened, Simone?" Tasha's voice was a mix of relief and anger. "I saw the video online, Logan Whitmore's goons treating you like a criminal. What were you thinking?" Simone winced as she returned her sister's embrace. "It's complicated, Tasha. You know I can't talk about it." She pulled away and tried to muster a reassuring smile, but her face was still stiff from the night's humiliation. "Complicated?" Tasha scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. "You're bruised, you were thrown in jail, and now the internet is calling you a corporate spy. How is any of that complicated?" Simone opened her mouth to respond, but all she could manage was a heavy sigh. Tasha had a point. Last night's incident had gone viral, with headlines already labeling her as a disgruntled activist trying to steal from Logan's company. It was exactly what he'd intended, a public spectacle to discredit her. "Let's just get out of here," Simone muttered, glancing around. A few passers-by had begun to notice her, whispering and pointing their phones in her direction. She couldn't afford another scene. The drive back to her apartment was tense, the silence between them filled with unspoken questions. Tasha kept glancing over at her, waiting for Simone to explain herself, but Simone's mind was elsewhere, racing through her next moves. When they finally arrived at her modest apartment on the city's edge, Tasha couldn't hold back any longer. "Simone, I'm serious. You need to tell me what's going on. You're not some random woman who gets herself arrested. This is about more than just trespassing." Simone turned away, heading to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. She knew her sister deserved answers, but the truth was too dangerous. If Tasha knew the real reason Simone was targeting Logan Whitmore, it would put her in harm's way too. "I promise, I'm handling it," Simone said quietly, staring into her glass. "Just, trust me." Tasha let out an exasperated sigh and leaned against the counter. "How can I trust you when you won't tell me what you're dealing with? You don't have to do this alone, you know." Simone's grip tightened around the glass. Alone. That word struck a chord. She had chosen this path, knowing it would isolate her, but it didn't make it any easier. Especially when Tasha was the only family she had left. "I have to do this, Tasha," Simone said, her voice barely a whisper. "If I don't, no one else will." Tasha studied her sister's face, searching for answers that Simone wasn't willing to give. Finally, she threw up her hands in frustration. "Fine, keep your secrets. But if you're going after Logan Whitmore, you better be careful. That man doesn't just play dirty, he makes the rules." Simone nodded, her resolve hardening. She knew all too well how powerful Logan was. Last night's debacle was just the beginning. But she couldn't back down now, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Tasha reluctantly left after extracting a promise that Simone would call if she needed help. Simone watched her sister's car disappear down the street before heading inside. The moment she closed the door, she let out a shaky breath, her facade of strength crumbling. She was exhausted, bruised, and angry at Logan, at the corrupt system that protected men like him, and at herself for letting him get under her skin. She hadn't planned on confronting him so publicly, but the opportunity had presented itself, and she couldn't resist. Simone walked over to her laptop, opening it to a flood of notifications. The video of her arrest was everywhere, plastered across social media and news sites. Logan's PR machine was working overtime, spinning the story to make her look like an unhinged criminal. She gritted her teeth and closed the browser window. She couldn't let the noise distract her. She had 72 hours before Logan's company's IPO went live, a deal she suspected was linked to money laundering and illegal surveillance. If she didn't act quickly, Logan would walk away with billions, untouchable behind layers of legal protection. Her phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. Simone hesitated, then picked up. "Hello? You're in over your head, Agent Brooks," a distorted voice crackled through the line. Her blood ran cold. No one was supposed to know her real identity, not yet. She had kept her cover carefully guarded. "Who is this?" she demanded, her heart racing. "Someone who knows what Logan Whitmore is truly capable of," the voice replied. "If you want to take him down, meet me at the old parking garage on 7th Street. Midnight. Come alone." Before Simone could respond, the line went dead. She stared at her phone, her mind reeling. Someone knew who she was, and they had information on Logan. But could she trust them, or was this just another trap? She had no choice. She was running out of time, and Logan was getting bolder by the minute. If this mysterious informant had even a sliver of truth to offer, she had to take the risk. As she glanced at the clock, Simone made a silent vow: whatever it took, she would bring Logan down. But first, she needed to survive the night. The night air was thick with tension as Simone slipped into the dark alley that led to the old parking garage on 7th Street. She had been debating whether to go to this meeting for hours, but with her clock ticking down, she knew she couldn't afford to ignore any lead. The rain from earlier had let up, but the streets were still damp, reflecting the cold glow of the city's neon lights. Simone kept her hood pulled low over her face, wary of the shadows that seemed to shift with every step. Her instincts were on high alert, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching her. As she approached the entrance to the parking garage, she paused. The structure was mostly abandoned, with broken lights flickering overhead and the faint smell of mildew in the air. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and yet, if this anonymous caller truly had information on Logan, it could be her only shot at turning the tables. Simone's hand instinctively brushed against the concealed taser in her pocket. She was unarmed, she had to be, given her suspension from the FBI, but she wasn't defenseless. She took a deep breath, steeling herself before stepping inside. The garage was eerily silent, the only sounds the faint drip of water and the soft scuffle of her boots on the concrete. She made her way up to the second level, where a lone figure stood in the shadows, partially illuminated by a dim overhead light. "You came," the distorted voice crackled through a voice modulator. The figure was dressed in a long trench coat and wore a baseball cap pulled low over their eyes. "I'm here," Simone replied, keeping her distance. "What do you have for me?" The figure shifted slightly but did not step forward. "Logan Whitmore's empire isn't just about money. He's using his tech company to collect data on powerful people. Politicians, CEOs, even law enforcement. He's blackmailing them to keep his hands clean." Simone's eyes narrowed. "And how do I know you're not setting me up? This could be another one of Logan's traps." The figure laughed softly, the sound distorted. "I get it. You don't trust me. But you're running out of time, Agent Brooks." Simone's blood froze. It was the second time tonight someone had addressed her as an FBI agent. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping closer. "I'm someone who was once like you," the figure said, lowering their voice. "I tried to bring down Logan, and he destroyed my life. But I have something that can help you." The figure reached into their coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, tossing it to Simone. She caught it, her eyes never leaving the stranger. "What's on this?" "Evidence of Logan's surveillance network. It'll show you how he's using his tech to manipulate the people who should be stopping him." The figure stepped back, disappearing further into the shadows. "Be careful, Agent Brooks. You have enemies on all sides. The FBI won't protect you if it means exposing their own secrets." Before Simone could ask more, the figure turned and sprinted deeper into the darkness. Simone hesitated for a second, then made a move to follow, but the sound of a car engine revving to life sent her instincts into overdrive. She whipped around just in time to see a pair of headlights blinding her, the car speeding directly toward her. Simone dove out of the way, hitting the ground hard as the car skidded past her, tires screeching. The vehicle disappeared into the night, leaving her breathless and covered in grime. Her heart pounded in her chest, the realization sinking in, someone had tried to silence her. Clutching the flash drive tightly in her hand, Simone scrambled to her feet. She had to get out of there before Logan's men came back to finish the job. She darted back through the alleyways, retracing her steps to where she had parked her car a few blocks away. As she drove away, her mind raced with the implications of what she had just learned. Logan wasn't just a corrupt businessman, he was running a covert surveillance empire, and the people he had dirt on weren't just going to sit back and let her expose him. If this information was real, she had just become a target for some of the most powerful people in the city. Simone's phone buzzed as she pulled up to her apartment. It was Tasha again, no doubt worried sick after their last conversation. But Simone couldn't risk involving her sister any further. She silenced the call and parked in a secluded spot away from her usual place, just in case she was being followed. Inside her apartment, Simone quickly locked the door behind her and set up her laptop on the kitchen counter. She inserted the flash drive, her hands trembling slightly. The screen flashed as encrypted files began to load, revealing a trove of documents, emails, and surveillance footage. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the files. There were records of meetings, secret conversations, and videos of influential figures in compromising situations. Logan had collected enough dirt to blackmail nearly every major player in the city. But the most shocking discovery was an internal memo with the FBI's logo. The document detailed a covert agreement between Logan's company and certain members of law enforcement, allowing him access to confidential data in exchange for funding secret projects. Simone's heart sank. This wasn't just about Logan anymore. It was about the very people she once trusted. If she exposed this, it could bring down not just Logan, but some of the highest-ranking officials in the bureau. The weight of her mission suddenly felt heavier than ever. She had just uncovered a conspiracy that ran deeper than she could have imagined. And now, with only 48 hours left before the IPO, she had to act fast. As she copied the files onto a secure drive, Simone's thoughts turned to her next move. She couldn't trust anyone, not even her former colleagues. She was truly alone in this fight. But if she didn't stop Logan, no one would. Simone leaned against the back wall of the dimly lit bar, her eyes scanning the crowded room. The air was thick with the scent of alcohol and cigar smoke, and the hum of conversations provided a constant background buzz. It was one of the last places she would have chosen to be, especially given the situation she was in. But this was her only shot. She adjusted her wig, a short, sleek bob that made her almost unrecognizable from the woman who had been publicly humiliated just days ago. The oversized sunglasses she wore hid the bruise that had blossomed on her cheek after her run-in with Logan's security team. Simone had learned to endure pain, but this was more than physical. It was the sting of knowing that she was fighting a war on her own, with no backup and no support. She kept her gaze on the far end of the room where a group of well-dressed men were gathered around a booth. Logan Whitmore sat at the center, looking as smug as ever, flanked by two burly bodyguards. Tonight, he was hosting a charity event in the backroom of one of the city's most exclusive clubs, a front, Simone suspected, for making last-minute deals before his company's IPO went live. Taking a deep breath, Simone reached into her purse and activated a small recording device. She needed hard evidence if she was going to expose Logan's illegal activities, and this was her chance to get it. The encrypted files she had retrieved the night before had revealed a pattern. Logan's company had been laundering money through shell corporations tied to fake charities. This event was likely just another scheme. "Can I get you something, miss?" The bartender's voice broke her concentration. She forced a smile and nodded, ordering a drink she had no intention of consuming. The less attention she drew to herself, the better. She watched as Logan laughed and toasted his guests, completely oblivious to the danger creeping up on him. Or so she hoped. Simone had to be careful. Logan's men were watching for anything suspicious, and the last thing she needed was to get caught in the lion's den. As she sipped her drink, she noticed a slim man in a tailored suit approach Logan. They exchanged brief pleasantries before the man handed over a sleek black folder. Simone's instincts screamed that whatever was in that folder was important. She needed to get closer. Sliding off her stool, she navigated through the crowd, moving with the ease of someone who had been trained to blend in. She could hear snippets of conversation as she passed by, mentions of stock prices, investments, and backroom deals. It was exactly the kind of talk she had expected, but nothing concrete enough to nail Logan yet. She reached the edge of Logan's booth, her heart pounding as she casually leaned against a pillar. Logan was too absorbed in his conversation to notice her presence. The man with the folder was gesturing toward a set of blueprints and speaking in hushed tones. "Once the IPO goes live, we move everything offshore. No one will be able to trace it," the man said, his voice just barely audible over the noise. Simone's pulse quickened. This was the confirmation she needed, proof that Logan's IPO was more than just a business move. It was the final step in laundering billions of dollars through his tech company. If she could record the rest of their conversation, she would have the evidence to take him down. But just as she was inching her way closer, one of Logan's bodyguards turned in her direction. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Simone felt a chill run down her spine. She turned away quickly, pretending to check her phone, but she could feel the man's gaze burning into her back. She needed to get out of there before they made her. Ducking her head, she slipped into a hallway that led to the restrooms, hoping to avoid suspicion. The hallway was quieter, the music from the main room muffled behind thick walls. Simone's fingers shook as she checked the recording device hidden in her purse. It had caught most of the conversation, but she needed more. Taking a deep breath, she pulled herself together. She wasn't done yet. As she turned to head back toward the main room, she nearly collided with the same bodyguard who had been watching her earlier. His massive frame blocked the narrow hallway, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Hey, I don't think I've seen you here before," he said, his tone more accusatory than curious. "What's your name?" Simone forced a nervous laugh, playing the role of a clueless socialite. "Oh, I'm just here with some friends. I'm new in town." She tried to sidestep him, but he didn't budge. "Funny," he said, crossing his arms. "I don't remember seeing you come in with anyone. Why don't you come with me? Mr. Whitmore would like to have a word." Panic shot through Simone's veins. She couldn't let them take her to Logan, that would end with her either in a cell or worse. Thinking quickly, she stumbled, feigning a drunken sway. "Ugh, too many martinis," she slurred, leaning heavily against the wall. "Can you help me find the ladies' room?" The guard hesitated, and that split second was all Simone needed. She slammed her knee into his groin, sending him doubling over with a grunt. Before he could react, she sprinted down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst through an emergency exit, setting off a blaring alarm. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she kept running, her mind focused solely on getting away. Behind her, she could hear the shouts of Logan's men as they gave chase. Simone's lungs burned as she rounded the corner into a dark alley. She glanced over her shoulder, no sign of them yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Desperation drove her forward until she reached a small, hidden staircase leading to the roof of an old building. Breathless, she crouched behind an air conditioning unit, listening for footsteps. After a few tense moments, the sound of Logan's men faded away, leaving her in silence. Simone leaned back against the cold metal, trying to steady her breathing. She pulled out her recording device and checked the playback. It was all there, the conversation, the mention of the offshore accounts. It wasn't everything she needed, but it was a start. She had bought herself a little more time, but she knew Logan would tighten his grip now. He would come after her with everything he had. Simone's phone buzzed with a new message from the anonymous contact who had given her the flash drive. "Good work tonight. But if you want to stop Logan, you'll need more than recordings. Meet me tomorrow, same place, midnight." Simone's jaw tightened. Whoever this contact was, they seemed to know her every move. But she had no choice. The clock was ticking, and if she didn't act fast, Logan's IPO would go live, and all of his money, and his secrets, would vanish beyond her reach. Simone's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let Logan slip away. Not this time. The sound of the rain hitting her window was soothing, almost enough to distract Simone from the chaos in her mind. She sat in her small apartment, the lights dimmed, watching the encrypted files from the flash drive upload onto her laptop. The screen cast a faint blue glow across the room, the only light in an otherwise dark space. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. Logan's IPO was set to go live in less than 48 hours, and once it did, his money would be safely laundered into untraceable offshore accounts. If that happened, it would be nearly impossible to stop him. The files she had obtained during her undercover stint at Logan's charity event were incriminating, but they weren't enough on their own. She needed more, a smoking gun that would bring Logan down before he could escape with billions. A soft ping signaled the upload was complete. Simone leaned forward, studying the data. There were emails, surveillance logs, and financial records. One document, in particular, caught her eye, a ledger showing a suspicious transaction involving a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. "This is it," she muttered to herself. If she could connect Logan to this offshore account, it would prove that his IPO was a front for laundering dirty money. But getting that evidence would be risky. It meant going deeper into the hornet's nest. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of her phone. The caller ID read unknown, the same number that had contacted her before. Simone hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello?" she said, keeping her voice steady. "You're getting close, Agent Brooks," the familiar distorted voice greeted her. "But you don't have much time. Logan knows you're onto him." "Who are you?" Simone demanded. "Why are you helping me?" There was a pause on the other end. "Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting to see Logan fall. But if you want to take him down, you need to hit him where it hurts. The IPO is just a distraction. His real operation is hidden in his offshore accounts." Simone clenched her fist. She was tired of these cryptic messages. "I already know about the offshore accounts. But I need more, something that can't be brushed aside as circumstantial evidence." The voice on the other end sighed. "Logan's right-hand man, Andrew Malik, handles all the offshore transactions. He's scheduled to meet with a banker tomorrow night to finalize the transfer of funds before the IPO goes live. If you intercept that meeting, you'll get everything you need." Simone's pulse quickened. "Where?" "Warehouse 37, down by the docks. Midnight. But be careful, Logan's men will be watching." Before Simone could ask any more questions, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. This was her chance to get the evidence she needed, but it would be dangerous. The docks were isolated, and if Logan's men caught her, she would have no backup. She couldn't afford to waste time worrying. Simone quickly began gathering her gear, a small camera, her taser, and a burner phone. She was going to need every advantage she could get. But just as she was about to leave, the lights in her apartment flickered, then went out entirely. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the faint glow of her laptop screen. Panic shot through her. A sudden crash came from her living room. Simone's instincts kicked in. She grabbed her taser and crept toward the source of the noise. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step careful and deliberate. As she peered around the corner, she saw the front door had been forced open. Two large men were rifling through her belongings, their shadows cast long and sinister against the walls by the dim light from the hallway. One of them glanced up and spotted her. "She's here," he shouted, reaching into his jacket. Simone didn't hesitate. She fired her taser, hitting him square in the chest. The man convulsed and collapsed to the floor, but his partner lunged at her before she could reload. They struggled, crashing into the coffee table and knocking over a lamp. Simone twisted and managed to elbow him in the ribs, but he was strong, too strong. He slammed her against the wall, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. "Logan sends his regards," the man growled, tightening his grip on her throat. Simone's vision began to blur as she struggled to breathe. Desperately, she reached into her pocket and jammed her thumb against the panic button on her burner phone. It was a last-ditch measure, set to send an emergency message with her location to Tasha. Just as her vision started to fade, the man was yanked backward. Tasha had burst into the apartment, wielding a baseball bat. The crack of wood against skull filled the room, and the attacker crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Simone gasped for air, collapsing to her knees. "Tasha," she wheezed, trying to steady herself. "What are you doing here?" "I knew you were up to something dangerous," Tasha replied, her face pale but determined. "I'm not letting you face these people alone." Simone nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you. But you need to get out of here. It's too dangerous." Tasha shook her head. Not a chance. If Logan's sending people after you, then we're in this together. Simone wanted to argue, but there was no time. She quickly gathered what she could and handed Tasha her spare burner phone. Okay, but you have to promise me, if anything goes wrong, you run. Don't look back. Tasha nodded reluctantly. I promise. Simone took a deep breath, trying to shake off the pain and fear. She had no choice but to move forward. The clock was ticking, and now, more than ever, she needed to expose Logan before he could destroy everything. They slipped out into the night, leaving the trash department behind. Simone's mind was laser-focused on the docks. If the anonymous caller was right, this meeting between Malik and the banker could be her last chance to stop Logan. As they drove toward the docks, Simone glanced over at Tasha, who was gripping the wheel tightly. You didn't have to come, Simone said quietly. Yeah, well, someone has to keep you from getting killed, Tasha replied with a faint smile. Now let's go take this bastard down. Simone managed a tired grin, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Logan thought he could scare her off, but all he had done was ignite a fire within her. The battle wasn't over yet. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. The icy wind whipped through the narrow streets as Simone and Tasha approached the docks. The faint scent of saltwater mixed with the pungent odor of fish, making the air thick and cold. It was almost midnight, and the area was eerily quiet. Rusting cargo containers and abandoned warehouses loomed in the darkness, casting long, ominous shadows. Simone's nerves were on edge. The anonymous informant's tip about the meeting between Logan's right-hand man, Andrew Malik, and the banker was her best lead yet. If she could intercept their conversation, she might finally get the smoking gun to bring Logan down. Beside her, Tasha clutched the handle of her small flashlight, her eyes darting around nervously. Are you sure about this? She whispered. This place is giving me the creeps. Simone nodded, her jaw set with determination. It's the only way. We're running out of time. She tightened her grip on her hidden camera, checking one last time that it was ready to record. She couldn't afford to miss a single word of tonight's meeting. They crept silently through the maze of cargo containers, keeping to the shadows to avoid being spotted. As they rounded a corner, Simone motioned for Tasha to stay low. Up ahead, the faint glow of flashlights illuminated the figures of Malik and a well-dressed man standing beside a sleek black SUV. Simone crouched behind a rusted container, adjusting her camera to capture the scene. She could hear snippets of their conversation, the words carried on the wind. We transfer everything offshore by tomorrow morning, Malik was saying, his voice low and urgent. Once the IPO goes live, no one will be able to touch the funds. Logan wants this clean and quick. The banker nodded, handing over a thick envelope. Everything you need is in there. Just make sure Whitmore gets his cut. Simone's heart raced as she zoomed in with her camera. This was the evidence she needed. The conversation confirmed everything she had suspected about Logan's scheme. But just as she was about to lean in closer, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approached from behind. Before she could react, a strong hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her back into the shadows. She struggled, but the grip was unrelenting. A familiar voice hissed in her ear, "Don't move." Simone's eyes widened. It was Agent Marcus Green, her former colleague from the FBI, the one person she thought she could trust. He released her just enough to spin her around, his expression grim. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing here?" she whispered, her mind reeling. She hadn't seen him since before she went undercover. "I should be asking you the same thing," Marcus shot back, his eyes flicking over to Tasha, who was frozen in fear. "You're in way over your head, Simone. You need to back off before you get yourself killed." Simone narrowed her eyes. "I thought you were off this case. Why are you here?" Marcus hesitated, glancing toward where Malik and the banker were still talking. "I'm here to clean up the mess you've made," he said, lowering his voice. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Logan has ties that go deep, deeper than you can imagine." Simone's heart sank. "You're working for him, aren't you?" she whispered, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "I'm doing what I have to do. Logan has connections in the bureau. You think you're the only one who's tried to take him down? He's buried careers, Simone. People far more powerful than you have tried and failed." Anger and betrayal surged through her. "You were supposed to be my friend, Marcus. We were partners." "Partners?" Marcus's voice was filled with bitterness. "We're all pawns in this game. You can either play along or get crushed." Before Simone could respond, the sudden sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of Malik's meeting. A bullet ricocheted off a nearby container, sending sparks flying. Chaos erupted as Malik's men began shouting orders, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Marcus grabbed Simone's arm, his eyes wide with fear. "You need to get out of here. Now." Simone yanked her arm free, fury burning in her eyes. "I don't need your help," she spat. "I'll take my chances." With that, she turned and grabbed Tasha's hand, pulling her into a sprint away from the scene. Gunshots continued to echo behind them as they weaved through the maze of cargo containers. Simone's mind was racing, she couldn't believe Marcus had betrayed her. It explained so much, how Logan's men always seemed one step ahead, how her leads kept drying up. As they reached the far side of the dock, Simone's foot slipped on the wet ground, sending her sprawling. Tasha helped her up, breathless. "We have to keep moving," Tasha urged, her voice shaking. "No," Simone said, panting. "We have to get that footage out." She quickly checked her camera, it was still intact, and it had captured everything. But as they made their way toward their car parked a few blocks away, Simone's phone buzzed with a new message from her anonymous contact: "They know who you are. The Bureau has turned against you. Get somewhere safe, now." Simone's blood ran cold. If the FBI was truly compromised, it meant she couldn't trust anyone. Logan's influence was far greater than she'd ever imagined. Now, even her own agency had been turned against her. Tasha looked at Simone, her eyes wide with fear. "What does that mean? What are we going to do?" Simone clenched her jaw, her resolve hardening. "We keep going," she said. "But we can't rely on anyone else. It's just us now." As they drove away from the docks, the city lights blurred in the rain-streaked windows. Simone couldn't shake the weight of Marcus's betrayal. The one person she thought she could trust had been working against her the entire time. But now, she had what she needed. The footage would expose Malik and, by extension, Logan. However, with the FBI compromised, getting it to the right hands would be nearly impossible. Simone glanced over at Tasha, who was gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. "We're going to need help," Simone said quietly. "But this time, we find someone outside the system." Tasha nodded, her expression fierce. "Whatever it takes. Let's bring that bastard down." Simone's resolve was unshakable now. She would take down Logan Whitmore and everyone who had betrayed her. Even if it meant going to war with the very institution she had once sworn to protect. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Simone and Tasha reached the small, nondescript safe house on the outskirts of the city. It was one of the few places left where Simone felt she could operate without being tracked. The tension in the car had been thick, neither sister speaking as they processed the shocking betrayal by Marcus and the revelation that the FBI had turned against Simone. As they slipped inside the safe house, Simone quickly locked the door behind them, setting the deadbolt and checking the windows. It was a cramped space, barely more than a single room with a worn-out sofa, a small kitchenette, and a flickering lamp that cast weak light over the peeling wallpaper. But it was quiet, and more importantly, it was off the grid. Tasha dropped her bag on the floor and let out a long, shaky breath. Okay, Simone, what's the plan? Because right now, it feels like we're completely out of options. Simone pulled out the camera she had used to record the conversation between Malik and the banker. We may be backed into a corner, she said, plugging the device into her laptop, but we've still got a few cards to play. As the video played on the screen, Tasha leaned in closer, her eyes wide. The grainy footage captured Malik confirming the offshore accounts and the money laundering operation tied to Logan's tech company. Simone's hands trembled slightly as she watched it. This was the evidence she had been searching for. This is it, Tasha whispered. This is exactly what you needed. Simone nodded. It's not enough to take down Logan entirely, but it's a start. The problem is, if I can't get this to someone trustworthy, it's worthless. The FBI's compromised, and every journalist I know is either under Logan's thumb or too scared to publish this. Tasha frowned, crossing her arms. So, what's our next move? We can't just sit on this. Simone paused, her mind racing. The footage was good, but it wouldn't be enough on its own to dismantle Logan's entire empire. She needed more, something that would leave no room for doubt, something so damning that even Logan's powerful allies couldn't protect him. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the anonymous informant: there's more you don't know. Whitmore's offshore accounts are linked to something far bigger than money laundering. I can show you where to look. But it's risky. Meet me at the old library, tomorrow night, midnight. Simone's heart skipped a beat. The old library was in one of the most dangerous parts of the city, a place where even the police wouldn't dare to venture after dark. It was the perfect location for a trap. But if this informant had more information that could expose Logan's operation, it was a risk she had to take. Another message? Tasha asked, noticing Simone's tense expression. Simone nodded. The informant wants to meet again. They say there's more to Logan's operation than just money laundering. Something bigger. Tasha's face paled. Are you sure we can trust them? They could be setting us up. I know, Simone admitted. But we don't have a choice. If we don't stop Logan before his IPO goes live, he's going to disappear, and everything he's done will get buried. Tasha exhaled sharply. Then we need to be prepared. I'll make sure we have a way out if things go south. Simone gave her sister a grateful smile, the exhaustion in her eyes clear. Thanks, Tasha. I don't know what I'd do without you. The next day was a blur of preparations. Simone and Tasha gathered what they could: burner phones, encrypted drives, and enough cash to disappear if things went sideways. By nightfall, they were ready. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air, but Simone couldn't afford to let fear control her. Not now. As the clock struck midnight, they approached the old library, its once majestic facade now crumbling and covered in graffiti. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. Simone's grip tightened around the small, concealed knife she had brought for protection. Stay close, she whispered to Tasha. And if anything feels off, we get out immediately. They pushed through the creaking doors and entered the dark, musty interior. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights as they made their way through the maze of abandoned bookshelves. Every sound echoed ominously, making it impossible to tell if they were truly alone. Over here, a voice called softly from the shadows. Simone tensed, turning her flashlight toward the sound. The figure from their previous meeting stepped forward, their face hidden beneath a hood. I'm glad you came, they said, their voice still distorted through the modulator. Start talking, Simone demanded. You said there's more to Logan's operation than money laundering. What is it? The informant nodded slowly. Logan's company isn't just laundering money. He's using his tech infrastructure to collect data on high-ranking officials, data he uses for blackmail. But it's not just politicians. He's targeting law enforcement, the military, even foreign governments. He's building a web of control that reaches beyond this city. Simone's mind reeled. She had suspected Logan was powerful, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Why not go public yourself?" "Because Logan has people everywhere," the informant replied. "If I tried to expose him, I'd be dead before I hit send. But you still have a chance." Simone was about to respond when she noticed something strange, movement behind the informant. Her eyes widened as she realized they were not alone. Figures were closing in from all sides, their dark silhouettes barely visible in the dim light. "Ambush!" Simone shouted, grabbing Tasha's arm. They sprinted toward the exit, the sound of gunfire erupting behind them. The informant cried out, but Simone didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. They burst through the library doors and into the cold night air. Tasha was panting heavily, her eyes wide with fear. "Simone, what the hell was that?" "It was a trap," Simone hissed, her mind racing. "Logan must have found out we were meeting. He's trying to tie up loose ends." They darted into a nearby alley, trying to lose their pursuers. The sound of footsteps and shouts echoed behind them, but they kept moving, driven by sheer adrenaline. As they reached the far end of the alley, Simone spotted a manhole cover. "This way," she said, prying it open with all her strength. They scrambled down into the darkness just as Logan's men reached the mouth of the alley. The stench of the sewers hit them like a wall, but it was the only way to escape. They sloshed through the ankle-deep water, the echoes of their pursuers growing fainter with each turn they took. When they finally emerged in a deserted part of the city, Tasha doubled over, gasping for breath. "We can't keep doing this, Simone," she said, her voice breaking. "We're not going to survive." Simone placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, her expression grim. "We have no choice. Logan's gone too far, and now we know his secret. We have to expose him before it's too late." Tasha nodded reluctantly, wiping tears from her eyes. "Then let's finish this." Simone's resolve hardened. They were in deeper than ever, but they couldn't turn back now. With the evidence she had gathered, she was ready to take the fight directly to Logan. It was time to bring his empire crashing down, once and for all. The cold steel cuffs bit into Simone's wrists as she slowly came to her senses. Her vision was blurry, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead disorienting her. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her head, only to realize with a sickening jolt that her hands were shackled to a metal chair bolted to the floor. The last thing she remembered was running through the sewers with Tasha, desperately trying to evade Logan's men. They had almost made it to safety when the sharp sting of a needle in her neck had sent darkness crashing over her. Now, she was trapped. The room was small, bare except for a steel table and a flickering light overhead. It smelled faintly of bleach, the scent mingling with the metallic tang of fear. Simone's heart pounded in her chest as she tugged against the restraints. Panic rose, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had been in tight spots before, she just needed to think. The sound of heavy footsteps approached, and the door creaked open. Logan Whitmore strode in, his tailored suit unwrinkled despite the late hour. He looked every bit the confident, arrogant billionaire, his smirk widening as he saw her bound to the chair. Well, Agent Brooks," Logan said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I must say, you've been quite the thorn in my side. But you should have known better than to poke the beast." Simone's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattle. Instead, she locked eyes with him, her gaze unwavering. Logan chuckled, walking around the table with a predatory grace. "I have to admit, I'm impressed. You came closer than anyone else to exposing me. But here we are. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. So, tell me, Simone, what exactly were you hoping to achieve? You're all alone now, no backup, no resources. Your precious FBI won't come to save you. Simone kept her voice steady. You can gloat all you want, Logan. But I've got enough evidence to bury you. The moment I don't check in, it's all going public. Logan's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. Ah, the old dead man's switch. Clever, but not clever enough. He motioned to one of his guards, who handed him a tablet. You see, I've already intercepted your communications. Your little insurance plan. It's been neutralized. Simone's heart sank, but she refused to let her fear show. If you think you can intimidate me into backing down, you don't know me very well, she said, her voice cold. Logan's smile widened. You misunderstand, Agent Brooks. This isn't about intimidation. It's about making a deal. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You're resourceful, determined, and frankly, wasted on the FBI. Work for me, and I'll make all of this disappear. You and your sister can live a comfortable life. No more running, no more hiding. The offer hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Simone stared at Logan, searching for any sign of sincerity, but all she saw was the cold calculation in his eyes. He didn't care about her, this was just another move in his twisted game. Simone let out a bitter laugh. You think I'd sell out everything I've fought for? To work for the likes of you? I'd rather die. Logan's expression darkened. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Be careful what you wish for, Simone. I can make that happen. Simone glared at him, her heart pounding, but she refused to break eye contact. Go ahead, do your worst. But know this, no matter what you do, someone will take you down. You can't buy your way out of this forever. For a moment, Logan's confident facade cracked, a flash of fury in his eyes. But he quickly recovered, giving her a cruel smile. We'll see about that. He turned to his guards. Take her to the holding room. Let her think about her options. As the guards roughly unshackled her from the chair, Simone struggled, but she was no match for their combined strength. They dragged her down a long, dimly lit hallway, the cold concrete floor rough against her feet. Her mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She couldn't let Logan break her, she had to find a way out. They threw her into a small, dark cell and slammed the door shut. The only light came from a narrow slit in the door, casting a faint glow over the damp, grimy walls. Simone's hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She couldn't afford to lose hope now. She had come too far to give up. Simone took deep breaths, forcing herself to calm down. She needed to think clearly. There had to be a way out, some weakness in Logan's fortress that she could exploit. Just then, she heard a faint tapping sound from the wall behind her. She turned, pressing her ear to the cold surface. The tapping continued, a rhythmic pattern, almost like a code. Her heart leapt. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Who's there? She whispered, tapping back in the same rhythm. The tapping stopped, and after a tense pause, a soft voice came through the wall. Simone? It's me, Marcus. Simone's heart skipped a beat. Marcus? What are you doing here? She hissed, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and anger. You betrayed me. I know, Marcus whispered back, desperation lacing his words. I had no choice. Logan had my family. But I'm here now, and I can help you get out. Simone's mind spun. Could she really trust him? After everything he'd done? But what other choice did she have? Logan's men would come for her soon, and if Marcus was offering a way out, she had to take it, even if it meant trusting a traitor. "How do I know this isn't another trap?" she asked, her voice low but fierce. "Because I'm done working for that bastard," Marcus replied. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I couldn't let Logan destroy another innocent life. I know where the security blind spots are. If you follow my instructions, I can get you out of here." Simone hesitated. She had nothing left to lose, but everything depended on whether Marcus was telling the truth. With a deep breath, she made her decision. "All right," she whispered. "Tell me what to do." Marcus quickly outlined the plan. There was a brief window when the guards changed shifts in the next hour. If she could slip past them, there was an emergency exit that led to an underground tunnel. It was risky, but it was her only chance. As the tapping stopped, Simone's resolve hardened. She would get out of here, and she would take down Logan, no matter the cost. The clock was ticking, and now, it was her move. Simone's heart raced as she pressed her ear against the cold steel door of her cell. Marcus had promised the guard change would happen in 10 minutes, but the seconds felt like hours as she waited in the dim, cramped space. Her wrists still ached from the cuffs, and her muscles screamed in protest, but she couldn't let exhaustion slow her down now. She had to escape. The sound of heavy boots clomping down the corridor made her freeze. She held her breath, listening carefully. The guards were talking, their voices gruff and indifferent. "I can't believe we have to babysit Whitmore's enemies now," one of them muttered. "Can't we just get rid of her?" "Not yet," the other replied. "Boss wants her to stew a bit longer. Make her more compliant." Simone's jaw clenched. If she didn't get out soon, Logan would come back with another twisted offer, or worse. She couldn't afford to stick around for that. The footsteps faded, and Simone waited a few more heart-pounding moments before tapping lightly on the wall. Almost immediately, Marcus's voice came through, barely more than a whisper. "They're gone. This is your chance," he said urgently. "There's a vent at the end of your cell. It's old, but you should be able to kick it out. I've disabled the cameras in your wing for 5 minutes. That's all the time you've got." Simone didn't waste a second. She dropped to her knees and crawled to the back of the cell, her fingers scraping against the rusted metal grate. Taking a deep breath, she drew back her leg and kicked hard. The vent cover groaned, then popped off with a clatter that sent her heart into her throat. "Move, now," Marcus urged from the other side of the wall. Simone pulled herself into the narrow duct, wincing as the jagged edges cut into her hands and knees. The air inside was stale and filled with dust, making it hard to breathe. But she pushed forward, crawling through the darkness with only Marcus's whispered directions to guide her. "Left at the next junction," Marcus instructed. "Then straight for about 30 feet. Simone's breaths came in short, sharp bursts as she navigated the maze of vents. Sweat dripped down her brow despite the cold metal pressing against her skin. Every scrape and clang echoed through the confined space, amplifying her fear that a guard might hear her. "Keep going. The exit vent is just ahead," Marcus said, his voice tense. "But hurry, they're starting to notice the camera feeds are down." Simone's heart sank at the sound of urgency in his voice. She pushed herself faster, the sound of distant voices and footsteps growing louder. Finally, she reached the end of the vent and kicked out the cover, dropping down into what appeared to be an old, disused storage room. "Marcus, I'm out," she whispered into the small earpiece he had given her earlier. "Now what?" "There's a door on your left," Marcus replied quickly. "It leads to the basement corridor. Head down to the last door, it's an emergency exit. But be careful. It's usually guarded." Simone crept through the dusty room, praying the door wasn't locked. To her relief, it opened with a soft click. She slipped into the dark hallway beyond, every nerve on edge. The air was damp and cold, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones. As she neared the end of the corridor, the sound of approaching footsteps sent her heart racing. 2 guards were patrolling the exit, their voices growing louder as they approached. Simone ducked into a shadowy alcove, her mind racing. She couldn't take them both down without making noise, and if she was caught now, it was over. But just as the guards turned the corner, Marcus's voice crackled through her earpiece again. "I've tripped a silent alarm on the opposite side of the building. They should be diverted. Wait for it." The guards stopped, listening to their radios. Then, without a word, they turned and rushed back the way they had come. Simone let out a silent breath of relief. "Nice work, Marcus," she whispered, stepping out of her hiding spot. "Don't thank me yet," Marcus replied. "There's a small security office before the exit. It should be empty, but I've disabled the alarm for only 60 seconds. Grab what you can, fast." Simone slipped into the room he indicated and quickly scanned the shelves. There were files, USB drives, and scattered papers, but one thick folder labeled Project Blackline caught her eye. She grabbed it, along with a portable hard drive that was already plugged into the security terminal. She didn't have time to see what was on it, but if Logan was storing it here, it had to be important. "Got it," she whispered. "I'm heading for the exit now." She sprinted toward the emergency door, her pulse racing as she heard distant shouts. They must have realized she was missing. She slammed into the metal door, throwing her weight against it, and stumbled out into the freezing night air. "Marcus, I'm out," she said, gasping for breath. "Where are you?" "Keep heading north," he replied. "There's an abandoned construction site. I've parked a car there. I'll guide you, just keep moving." The wind bit into her skin as she sprinted across the open yard, the warehouse behind her lit up with flashing lights. The sound of barking dogs and shouting guards grew louder, but Simone focused on Marcus's directions, zigzagging through debris and half-finished structures. She spotted the car hidden behind a pile of steel beams just as Marcus had promised. As she yanked open the door and jumped inside, she found Marcus sitting in the driver's seat, his face pale and drawn. "Go," she shouted, slamming the door shut. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching as they sped away from the warehouse. Simone glanced back, watching the shrinking figures of Logan's men as they disappeared into the darkness. For a few moments, the only sound was the roar of the engine and their labored breaths. Simone finally turned to Marcus, her eyes narrowing. "This doesn't mean I trust you," she said coldly. "You've still got a lot to answer for." Marcus nodded, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. "I know. But if you want to take Logan down, you're going to need my help. That folder you grabbed, it's the key to everything. Project Blackline is the real reason Logan has been untouchable." "What is it?" Simone demanded. Marcus took a deep breath, his face grim. "It's a surveillance program that uses AI to predict and manipulate the actions of powerful people, politicians, CEOs, even military leaders. Logan uses it to blackmail them into doing his bidding." Simone's blood ran cold. "So, that's how he stayed one step ahead. He's been controlling the game from the shadows." Marcus nodded. "And if you expose him, the entire system will come crashing down. But we have to act fast. The IPO is hours away, and once it goes live, all of his data will be encrypted beyond our reach." Simone's mind was racing, but she couldn't let herself get overwhelmed. They had one last chance to stop Logan. And now, with Project Blackline in her hands, she finally had the leverage she needed. "All right," she said, her voice steely with resolve. "Let's end this." Simone sat hunched over the laptop in the dimly lit construction site's makeshift office. Her fingers flew over the keys as she tried to decrypt the files from the portable hard drive she had grabbed from Logan's security office. Every click felt like a ticking clock, the IPO looming just hours away. Marcus paced behind her, his eyes darting toward the entrance. "How much longer?" he asked, the tension in his voice palpable. Simone gritted her teeth, trying to block out the noise. "I'm working as fast as I can, Marcus. But this encryption is no joke. If you have any bright ideas, now would be the time." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "We can't go public with half-baked evidence. We need to decrypt those files and get them to someone who can broadcast it." Simone nodded. The folder labeled Project Blackline contained enough to bring Logan's empire crashing down, but only if she could get the files out to the public. Every attempt she made to decrypt the files was met with another layer of security. Logan had gone to great lengths to protect his secrets. As she worked, Tasha rushed into the room, her face pale and eyes wide. "We've got a problem," she said, panting. "Logan's men are sweeping the area. I saw at least 3 cars circling the block." Simone's heart skipped a beat. "Damn it. He's not giving up," she muttered, pushing her laptop aside. "Marcus, how much time do we have before they find us?" "Not much," Marcus replied, peering out through the cracked window. "If they find us here, we're done." Simone glanced at her laptop. The files were only halfway decrypted. She had managed to pull out a few key documents linking Logan to several high-profile politicians and law enforcement officials, but it wasn't enough to prove the existence of Project Blackline. She needed the full data set to expose the extent of Logan's surveillance network. "Can you buy us some time?" she asked Marcus. Marcus nodded. "I'll see what I can do." He grabbed a pistol from his bag and slipped out of the room, leaving Simone and Tasha alone. Tasha came over to Simone's side, her hands trembling. "Simone, are we really going to be able to pull this off? It feels like we're running out of options." Simone reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. "We have to. Logan's been getting away with this for too long. And now, we have what we need to stop him." She turned back to her laptop, her focus sharpening. "But I need you to help me. We're running out of time." Tasha nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Okay, tell me what to do." Simone instructed Tasha on how to set up a secure connection to one of her journalist contacts. They needed to upload the files as soon as they were decrypted. The plan was to get the information into the hands of someone who couldn't be easily silenced, someone who had the reach to expose Logan's secrets to the world. The minutes ticked by, the tension in the room growing thicker with every second. Outside, the sounds of shouting and footsteps echoed through the construction site. Simone's hands were shaking as she continued working, every keystroke feeling like it could be her last. Finally, a message flashed on her screen, "Decryption complete." "I've got it," Simone exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. She quickly opened the files, her eyes scanning the contents. The documents were damning. There were records of Logan using his AI system to manipulate elections, blackmail high-ranking officials, and even orchestrate the downfall of rival corporations. "This is it, Tasha," Simone said, her voice shaking with excitement. "This is everything we need." Tasha immediately began uploading the files to the secure server. But as she did, the laptop screen flickered, and a warning message appeared, "Connection compromised. Attempted breach detected." "No, no, no!" Simone shouted, frantically typing to counter the attack. "They've found us. Logan's trying to shut us down." Tasha's fingers flew over the keyboard, but it was too late. The connection was severed, the upload cut off at 72%. The files were only partially sent. Simone cursed under her breath. They were so close, but now, their last chance to go public was slipping away. Marcus burst back into the room, his face flushed. "We've got to move, now. Logan's men are coming in through the main gate. I bought us a few minutes, but we can't stay here. Simone grabbed the portable hard drive and shoved it into her backpack. We need to find another way to get this out. The journalists won't take our calls anymore, Logan's shut them down. We need to go straight to the people. Marcus's eyes widened. You're talking about a live broadcast. But how? All the networks are compromised. Not all of them, Simone said, her mind racing. There's a pirate radio station on the west side of the city. They owe me a favor. If we can get there, we can broadcast everything. Marcus and Tasha exchanged a look, then nodded. All right, let's move, Marcus said. We'll take the back alleys. It's riskier, but it's our best shot at avoiding Logan's men. They grabbed their gear and slipped out into the night. The city was eerily quiet, the streets bathed in the flickering glow of neon signs. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows. Simone's mind was racing. She had one shot to bring Logan down, and she couldn't afford to fail now. As they approached the pirate radio station, the sound of engines roared behind them. Logan's black SUVs came screeching around the corner, their headlights blinding in the darkness. Run! Simone shouted, grabbing Tasha's hand. They darted into a narrow alley, Marcus covering their retreat with his pistol. Bullets whizzed past, hitting brick walls and sending sparks flying. They reached the radio station's entrance, a battered metal door with graffiti scrawled across it. Simone pounded on the door, praying the station manager would open up. After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, revealing a grizzled man with a cigarette dangling from his lips. You're either crazy or desperate, he said, eyeing their panicked faces. Come on, get inside. Simone, Tasha, and Marcus rushed in, slamming the door behind them. The station was a chaotic mess of wires, old broadcasting equipment, and the faint smell of burnt electronics. Can you get us on air? Simone asked breathlessly. The station manager nodded, already flipping switches and adjusting dials. You've got 5 minutes, tops. Then they'll trace the signal. Simone nodded, her heart pounding. 5 minutes is all we need. As they set up, Marcus turned to Simone. Are you sure about this? Once you go live, there's no turning back. Simone looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. We've come too far to stop now. Let's end this. With a deep breath, she stepped up to the microphone. This is Agent Simone Brooks, she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. What I'm about to share will expose the darkest secrets of Logan Whitmore's empire. As she spoke, Tasha and Marcus monitored the broadcast, watching as viewers flooded the live stream. The truth was finally coming to light, and there was nothing Logan could do to stop it now. But just as Simone began revealing the details of Project Black Line, the station's power flickered. The door behind them burst open, and Logan's men stormed in, guns drawn. The fight for the truth was far from over. The pirate radio station erupted into chaos as Logan's men stormed through the doors, their guns drawn. The faint hum of broadcasting equipment filled the air, mixing with the panicked shouts of the station manager and the whir of computers. The tension was electric, the stakes higher than they had ever been. Simone's heart pounded as she gripped the microphone, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Logan Whitmore has been using his AI surveillance system to blackmail politicians, control the media, and manipulate the justice system. I have the evidence to prove it, she declared, her voice carrying through the airwaves. Tasha and Marcus were working frantically at the control panel, trying to keep the broadcast live as Logan's goons swarmed the room. We're still on air, but we've only got a few minutes before they cut the signal, Marcus shouted over the noise. Simone continued speaking into the microphone, her words rapid fire. Project Black Line is the key to everything. Logan's empire is built on a foundation of corruption, and I have the files to expose every single one of his accomplices. We need the public to know." A sudden, violent crash cut her off as one of Logan's men lunged at Marcus, slamming him against the wall. The impact sent papers flying, and the crackle of broken electronics filled the air. Tasha screamed, grabbing a makeshift weapon, a heavy wrench from the station's cluttered workbench, and swung it at another attacker, buying them precious seconds. Simone refused to back down. She turned back to the microphone, her voice unwavering. "You can silence me, but you won't silence the truth. The files are already out there. The world will see what you've done." Logan's men were closing in, their dark figures looming like shadows in the dimly lit room. But Simone wasn't about to let them win. With a surge of determination, she reached for the portable hard drive she had hidden in her jacket. It was their last lifeline. Marcus, still grappling with one of the attackers, shouted, "Simone. They're going to cut the power any second." Simone's eyes darted to the broadcast console. The connection was still live, but it was hanging by a thread. If she could upload the final files from the hard drive, she might still be able to reveal the full scope of Logan's crimes. Her fingers moved with lightning speed, connecting the hard drive and starting the upload process. But before she could finish, the door to the station's control room slammed open with a deafening bang. Logan Whitmore himself walked in, flanked by two of his most trusted enforcers. The room seemed to freeze, the chaos slowing to a tense, deadly quiet. Well, Logan drawled, his voice dripping with disdain as he surveyed the scene. "Agent Brooks. I have to say, you've been quite the nuisance." Simone's gaze locked onto him, her jaw clenched. "The world is about to see the real you, Logan. You can't stop this." Logan's lips curled into a cold smile. "I've stopped people like you before, Simone. Do you really think you're any different?" He motioned to one of his men, who ripped the portable hard drive out of the console. The upload stopped at 89%, the screen flashing a warning that the connection had been severed. Simone's heart sank. They were so close. Logan leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You've lost, Agent Brooks. Your evidence will never see the light of day." But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Simone noticed something: the broadcast light was still blinking. Tasha, who had been crouching behind the console, gave her a subtle thumbs up. The station was still transmitting audio. The world could still hear them. Drawing a deep breath, Simone turned back to the microphone, ignoring Logan's sneering presence. "To anyone listening, spread the word. Logan Whitmore's Project Blackline is a tool of surveillance and control. He's blackmailing the most powerful people in the country. And even if he destroys this broadcast, the files are out there. Find them. Share them. Don't let him win." Logan's face twisted with rage. "Enough of this." He pulled out a sleek black pistol and aimed it directly at Simone's head. "Say another word, and I will end you." The room went silent. Tasha's eyes were wide with terror, Marcus struggled against his captors, and the station manager cowered behind his equipment. But Simone remained defiant, staring down the barrel of the gun. "You can kill me," Simone said, her voice steady. "But the truth is already out there. You can't control the narrative forever." Logan's finger twitched on the trigger, but before he could pull it, Marcus broke free from his captors with a roar. He lunged at Logan, knocking the gun aside just as it fired. The bullet struck the wall, sending a shower of plaster dust into the air. Simone didn't waste the distraction. She grabbed the portable hard drive from Logan's fallen guard and slammed it back into the console. The upload resumed, ticking from 89% to 90% as Marcus and Logan grappled on the floor. Tasha rushed over to help Marcus, swinging her wrench wildly at the guards trying to subdue him. The air was filled with shouts, gunfire, and the hum of the broadcast, but all Simone could focus on was the upload bar inching forward. 95%. 96%. Come on, she muttered, her hands shaking as she watched the numbers climb. Logan, finally throwing Marcus off him, staggered to his feet, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "I will end all of you," he shouted, grabbing his pistol again. But before he could fire, the upload bar hit 100%. The screen flashed, files uploaded successfully. Simone let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The files were now live, accessible to every journalist, hacker, and citizen who cared enough to look. The truth was out, and Logan couldn't control it anymore. Realizing he had lost, Logan's face twisted into a mask of fury. "You think this changes anything? I still have my connections. My money. You'll never be able to." But he was cut off by the sudden blare of sirens outside. The sound of vehicles screeching to a halt echoed through the building as armed officers stormed in. The pirate radio station had been broadcasting Logan's threats live, and law enforcement had finally caught wind of what was happening. "Hands in the air, now!" shouted one of the officers as they surrounded Logan and his men. Logan's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He dropped his gun, his face a mask of disbelief. Simone couldn't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction as she watched him get handcuffed. It was over. As the officers began to clear the room, Marcus stumbled over to Simone, his face bruised but smiling. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "You actually did it." Simone nodded, her exhaustion catching up with her all at once. "We did it," she corrected, glancing over at Tasha, who was wiping away tears of relief. The world knew the truth now. Logan Whitmore's empire was crumbling, and the people he had controlled would finally be free. But even as she watched Logan being led away, Simone knew there was still work to be done. The files she had exposed were just the beginning. Corruption ran deep, and she was ready to keep fighting. But for now, they had won a crucial battle. And that was enough. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting thin slivers of light across the room. Simone Brooks sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her arms resting on her knees. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the steady beeping of monitors were almost soothing after the whirlwind of chaos she had just endured. Tasha entered the room, a bright smile lighting up her tired face. "They just announced it on the news," she said, waving her phone triumphantly. Logan Whitmore was denied bail. The judge called him a threat to public safety. "Looks like the files you uploaded were enough to convince even the most skeptical." Simone let out a long, deep breath, relief washing over her. It was finally over. "That's good news," she said, managing a small smile. But the exhaustion in her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and relentless battles. "How's Marcus?" "He's doing okay," Tasha replied, her expression softening. "He's a tough one, that's for sure. He's being treated in the room down the hall. Said he'd come by once the doctors clear him." Simone nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her former partner. Despite everything, Marcus had come through when it mattered most. Without him, they never would have made it out of that radio station alive. The door creaked open, and Marcus limped in, wincing with every step. "I hear we made the headlines," he said with a grin, though it was tinged with pain. "We did," Simone confirmed. "Project Blackline is out in the open now. The public is finally seeing Logan for what he really is." Marcus's smile faded, and he sank into the chair beside her bed. "You did good, Simone. But you know this isn't the end, right? Logan may be behind bars, but there are plenty more like him still out there." Simone's eyes hardened. "I know. But this is a start. We've shown the world that people like him can't operate in the shadows forever." Tasha leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "So, what's next?" Do we go back to the bureau? Try to rebuild what's left? Simone hesitated. The thought of returning to the FBI after everything she had uncovered about its corruption left a sour taste in her mouth. I don't know if I can go back, she admitted. The bureau's compromised, and there are too many people in power who are more interested in protecting their own than serving justice. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. But we can't just walk away. There are still people who need to be exposed, systems that need to be torn down. Simone looked out the window, her mind racing. Marcus was right. They had struck a blow against Logan, but he was just one player in a much larger game. The files she had uncovered hinted at a network of powerful figures who were complicit in Logan's schemes. There was still so much more to do. She turned back to Tasha and Marcus, a new resolve forming in her eyes. We don't need the Bureau to fight back. We can do this on our own, operate off the grid, expose the corruption from the outside. Tasha raised an eyebrow. You're talking about becoming a rogue operation. Do you really think we can take on these people without the resources of the FBI? We've already done it once, Simone replied. And now, we have the public on our side. Logan's downfall has sparked something, a movement. People are starting to ask questions, to demand accountability. If we can harness that, we can make a real difference. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with newfound determination. All right, I'm in. But if we're doing this, we need to be smarter, faster, and more prepared than ever. Logan's allies are going to retaliate. They're not going to let this go unanswered. Simone nodded. Agreed. We'll need to build a network, find people we can trust, gather resources. But first, we need to lay low and regroup. Tasha let out a nervous laugh. So, no vacation, huh? I was hoping for a break after almost getting killed. Simone chuckled softly. Sorry, Tash. Looks like we're not done just yet. The mood in the room lightened, a sense of camaraderie settling over the three of them. For the first time in what felt like years, Simone allowed herself to relax, even if just for a moment. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As the sun set outside the window, casting the room in a warm, golden glow, a knock came at the door. A nurse entered with a small package. This came for you, Agent Brooks, she said, handing it over before leaving. Simone's brows furrowed as she tore open the package. Inside was a single USB drive, along with a handwritten note, "You've only scratched the surface. The real game is just beginning." Her breath caught in her throat. There was no signature, but she had a sinking feeling she knew who it was from, the same anonymous informant who had guided her through Logan's takedown. What is it? Tasha asked, leaning over to peer at the drive. Simone shook her head slowly. I'm not sure. But if it's from who I think it is, it means there's more, much more. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Another lead? Looks like it, Simone replied, slipping the drive into her jacket pocket. We'll need to analyze it, see what we're dealing with. Tasha groaned. Just when I thought we'd get a moment to breathe. Simone stood, her resolve renewed. No rest for the wicked, or for those trying to stop them. She gave her sister a reassuring smile. Besides, we can't let Logan's allies get comfortable. They need to know we're still watching. Marcus chuckled softly. All right then. Looks like we've got a new mission. Where do we start? Simone's eyes sparkled with determination. We start by following this lead. If what's on this drive is as explosive as I think, we could be looking at something even bigger than Project Blackline. As they left the hospital room, the weight of the USB drive in her pocket reminded Simone that her fight was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. The truth was out there, and she was ready to uncover it, one battle at a time. The fight against corruption had only just begun, and this time, she wasn't going to stop until every last secret was dragged into the light.